Good morning, everyone. It is time for class to start, so if you will find your way to your seats.
Wednesday starts to 31 football. 42.
Hey, so that worked pretty good. Order in the court. Order in the church building. Sorry to the people online. All right, we are continuing our study this morning of the book of Hebrews 11, or the people of Hebrews chapter 11. And so we're going to be starting out in that chapter shortly if you want to go ahead and open your Bibles there. Today specifically, we're going to be covering Noah. An interesting fact about Noah, well, kinda, is that there is a whole, chapter in the Quran about Noah, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if you ever knew that. I would recommend giving it a read. If you've never read any part of the Quran before, that's kind of a fun introduction right there. It's basically the discussion between Noah and the Lord having to do with the destruction of man. So it's kind of fun. All right, let's test your remembrance of this story, the story of Noah, right? How many degrees was the water that flooded the earth?
Seriously?
Yes. How many degrees was the water that flooded the earth? It's in the text. Any guesses? Anyone know for sure? Oh, come on, guys.
60. John 3:16.
No. It's really close, though. Wait, did you say John 3:60? Well, I mean, in a way, you're right. But it's not John. It's just the 360. It was 360 degrees. The water covered the whole earth. It was everywhere, guys. Come on. 360 degrees all the way around. Yeah, there we go. All right. Well, I'm glad that everyone's awake this morning. All right, let's do a little recap. What do we remember about Abel and Enoch here? What's significant about this class? What are we studying here? Anyone, give us a start. Heroes of faith, yes. Faithfulness. What specifically about Abel and Enoch do we remember?
They both pleased God.
They both please God. I'm just judging how closely you guys will be listening to me based off of how closely you listened to the other two before me. Anything specific? What was significant about their faithfulness? What are some of the conclusions that we've drawn about the nature of the faithfulness in these examples? Yeah, Abel offered a sacrifice that was pleasing to the Lord.
Enoch walked with God.
Enoch walked with God. There's a lot of information right there, a lot of details. No, I like how Rich handled that study. That's a fun one. All right. Well, why do we study the faith of these old-timers, these guys that are used as examples in Hebrews 11? What's the point for us to dive into their lives, and what's the purpose that we see in Hebrews 11 for them showing this? Cloud of witnesses. Yeah. Yes.
Well, chapter 12, verse 1, he said, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings to us so closely, and let us run endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus as the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God.
Yeah, so this is very much an example for us to have Christ-centered lives and an encouragement for the people, the intended audience of Hebrews too. All right, so what is the intended audience of Hebrews? Who? Who is the intended audience?
They seem to be Jewish Christians.
Okay, what does that mean, Jewish Christians? How can you be a Jew and a Christian at the same time?
Formerly Jewish.
All right. Jew by birth, Christian convert? Yeah. Very good. And so why is that so unique for the book of Hebrews? What's different about the book of Hebrews maybe than some of the other New Testament books? Ooh. Yes.
It references the Old Testament a lot, like the law.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of analogy or the fulfillment of the Old Covenant in
Yeah.
the New.
If I was to write Hebrews as a class project when I was in school and I was to submit it, I would get in trouble for plagiarism, right? There's so much Old Testament in Hebrews. Of course, plagiarism is not necessarily a bad thing, the way that they were using it and socially how that was used back then. But yeah, it's grounded in the Old Testament and using the Old Testament as examples to point towards Christ. Now, there's kind of two main, I guess, purposes of the book of Hebrews, it seems. The first one was to draw these connections from the Old Testament to the New Testament for the significance of these Jewish Christians who would have been familiar with the Old Testament, and of course, you know, different prophecies and the lives of these people. We'll see a little bit later on here in Hebrews chapter 11, part of the reason why we are looking at these characters from the Old Testament, these people like Noah. And the second reason is to encourage them because of the persecution that was going on, the ongoing persecution. So if you'll, let's see, where do I start here? You'll start at Hebrews chapter 10, verse 32. Hebrews 10:32. But recall the former days when after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with suffering, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you have compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. Do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. So, in times of struggles, don't throw away your faith, essentially, which directly leads into Hebrews chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, right? Well, 1 through 3. Does anyone else want to read today? Do we have any readers? Let's do Hebrews 11, 1 through 3. Someone?
Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it as the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible.
All right. Of course, we're going to have some discrepancy in translations, so my notes here are going to change from maybe yours potentially. The first line item here that I have from those verses is the assurance of things hoped for. What is that? Substance. Yes. Hot dogs.
It's the trust we put in God's word that if he said it, we're going to receive it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. All right. What's the convictions of things not seen in different words? Evidence. Is evidence not something that you would see? Maybe. Yeah.
I think evidence is a bad translation.
Yeah.
I like conviction. It's conviction in my heart. Even though I can't see it, God said it, and therefore it will be.
What translations are those in? I gotta bounce between Blue Letter Bible in here.
Evidence is New King James.
Okay.
Conviction is New
Okay. That would be a fun word study that I did not do before now, but would be a fun one to do in the future. Conviction of things not seen, I guess I kind of understand to mean more of the maybe the personal, and it's hard not to use a word in a definition that you're defining. The personal conviction, the thing that you know to be true, maybe without the things that you see there. All right.
Yeah, in other words, you don't need proof for it
Right.
to believe it.
Yeah. Right. Or maybe your proof to believe something is not in that thing itself. Say, let's say I'm out at work one day, and Mr. Marty shows up at the job site that I was working on, and he says, "The whole homestead burnt down." You know, I don't have the evidence to see that the homestead burnt down unless I can see the smoke. But I have the proof that he is a reliable person, that he probably doesn't have any reason to lie to me for that reason, or for any reason, and that I can probably trust his words there. You know, faith, and a lot of times faith is talked about as something that it's a like a leap of faith, something that you can't really prove, you can't really trust, but is that really true? Maybe about one specific thing or several specific things, but there is a foundation to belief. You know, we have faith in God not because there's no evidence in God. We have faith in what God does. We believe what he says because we believe him based off of the evidence that we have seen. All right, I have so many hands up. Go on.
This whole thing makes me think of John 20, where Jesus says to Thomas, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who do not see and yet believe." And I think that's the concept we're dealing with right there.
Very true. Yeah. Rich?
Exactly what she just said. The thing is, if we can see it, then it's not of faith.
Yeah.
So we got to see through the eyes of faith, not through these physical ones.
Very true. Very true. Yes, Mr. Marty?
Kind of thinking about these folks here and the people that they're referring to. There's evidence, like your example, say with me, right? Because of your history with me, you would then believe that I told that it actually burnt down. And so with the folks that we have here listed, their history with God and the generations that came before them allow them to trust God because, you know, I mean, Adam and Lamech, Adam and Noah almost, but Adam and Lamech, they overlapped. You know what I mean? And
Right.
So like these people could have communicated what God had done in the past, you know, and then you know, getting kicked out of the garden and all of these types of things that took place to where, and when we get to Noah, when God speaks to him, he's like, yeah, okay. I've got all of this history already with God, you know, that he has done on earth, that I can absolutely trust what he's telling me. And so like for us, we have all of these people to look at, like the Hebrew writers pointing us to, and then all the rest of Scripture to say, yeah, whatever God says, it's true.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, something that I was thinking about mentioning later. But so the overlap here, not just that, but this very direct lineage right here that we're kind of looking through. Do you think those overlaps in that lineage is something that impacts Noah? He is, what was it, the great-grandson of Enoch, the one who walked with God. And while the rest of the world is kind of falling away, of course, they're also descendants of Adam, but it seems like the descendants of the people who are falling away seem to be wicked, while the righteous are descendants of righteous people. Now, is that a hard, fast, true rule? Like that's going to happen absolutely? I'm righteous, my children are going to be righteous. Yeah, Jesse?
Yeah, these are all good points that have been brought up. I think it can be two things at once, right? There is an element of faith that just as Kathy brought up, like with Jesus, we weren't there,
Mm-hmm.
but we are basing our faith off of, as Marty was pointing out, the scriptures, which there's plenty of evidence to prove that those are true and they are God's word. And even the word here that you brought up in verse 1, the word conviction, New American Standard translates it conviction. The word's elentos, and it can be translated prove, and I think in some cases it is.
Okay.
And, kind of your illustration, I think is a good one. And so maybe if you did see the smoke, maybe that's a bit of more along those lines.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
saw ash all over Marty, right? And so in some ways, as Rich pointed out last week, we do see evidence of God through the creation, as Paul wrote in Romans 1. And it's clearly seen, it's everywhere, and it necessitates an all-powerful, all-eternal, right, non-contingent being to be able to create that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be, it can be both.
It's almost like it contains the fingerprint of God.
Yeah.
It's kind of what you're saying almost.
Yeah, so we don't have a blind faith.
Yeah.
Like there can
Oh,
be
yeah.
sometimes some misunderstanding of what, like we're led to believe, well, you just have to have faith. And, well, my faith is based on evidence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a blind faith. Now, it's true, I wasn't there. So in some case, I'm placing my faith upon the things which were written, but there's proof that those are true, and they are God's word.
Mm-hmm.
So, among many other things.
Yeah, I've seen like the surges of denominational like popularity and stuff. It seems like there's in some of them, in some of my friends, it's a very much a feeling based thing, and unfortunately, like feelings are the strongest when they are in response to truth, right? And so this feelings-based faith, I wonder how far it's going to go once it starts to get challenged. Like if these feelings-based Christians were around during the same time period that Hebrews was written, were they lasting? You know, because they're being persecuted. You know, you think someone that is like feeling God is going to be feeling Him as someone is like torturing them? It's just there's a lot of bad reasoning, I think, in Christendom today, using that in a very wide reason there. But the point there is it's really important to our faith, like Jesse is saying there, and is apparently built into the word that I didn't realize it was, is very much it's concrete. It's based off of truth, and that's something that's really important. I got a couple of hands up, so Aaron, go ahead.
I don't know if this ties in with that on the faith and trust and where it's coming from, but Noah would have gotten all of his information, a lot of it probably from his grandfather even, who was alive and could have possibly known Adam,
Mm-hmm.
because they were all alive at the same time.
At the least, a lot of encouragement, right?
Yeah, so just that history that, because Noah was alive with his grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
but his grandfather was alive at the same time Adam would have been alive.
Yeah.
So just knowing that connection, the story that was being transmitted was firsthand knowledge of a lot of that stuff
Mm-hmm.
transmitted down. So that can also promote your faith in what's being said, because you know it's from a trustworthy source that's coming to you, not
Yeah.
just hearsay. It's like, no, I lived this. This is what happened, and hearing the story told down.
I think that says a lot about trying to show your faith in your family in a certain way, you know, and living out your faith and teaching it to. Okay, I think we had a question over here, or statement, or.
Well, I grew up in Assemblies of God. My grandpa was a preacher.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very much that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I really struggled when I started coming to Church of Christ and really studying the Bible. And I thought, it's so weird because at that feeling, touchy-feely
Mm-hmm.
Yet I'm looking, now I'm studying the Bible and God's Word, but I wasn't feeling.
Mm.
I was really struggling with that because I thought I don't have a feeling anymore, and it really discouraged
Yeah.
me and confused me because I thought I don't feel alive, and I didn't know. But now that I've understood, I mean, I'm getting into God's Word. His Word is alive, so it's just breathes that life through me, but it's constant. It doesn't die off if I don't go to church on Sunday for the same reasons.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I need it now. It's hard to describe, but for just totally different reasons.
Yeah.
I have a joy in my heart. I have a fulfillment in my life because I'm studying truth and because God's Word is in me, not because of this, I don't even know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just always a hype, and you get there and you just feel like, oh, everything was so, so.
Mm.
And then that carried you through almost until the end of the week, but it really, if you missed, then you were just lost because
Yeah.
you didn't have that. It's just so
It's like you're a vehicle and you're getting fueled.
running out of gas.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Rich.
First of all, I love what Sister Tanya just said. Thank you for sharing with us. As we dig deeper into the context here in Hebrews 11, what he's really getting at, I think, is that we put our trust and faith in the promises that he promised. That's what they did. Even though they couldn't see the fulfillment of those promises, like Abraham didn't get to see that his descendants were to be as numerous as the stars and the sand of the sea, but he believed it.
Right.
And for us, we're promised heaven. We don't see it,
Mm-hmm.
but we believe it to the point that we are willing to live our lives in such a way based on that faith.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It's very true. And it goes into that a little bit later on too, in Hebrews 11. But I thought that I was going to be struggling for time a little bit. Just so you know, we're in the process of packing. I did not spend as much time as I had wanted to prepare for this class, so I'm like, I got to stretch this out a little bit. Now I'm realizing we're like in the introduction still, so we're going to have to move on here a little bit. So let's go ahead and read Hebrews 11, verse 7. By faith, Noah, being warned by God concerning events as yet unseen, in reverent fear, constructed an ark for the saving of his household. By this he condemned the world and became an heir of the righteousness that comes by faith. All right. Now, for the sake of being able to actually have a good, somewhat rounded lesson, hopefully, let's go ahead and jump back to Genesis and skip some discussion here. All right. So we're just going to kind of skip around. All right. Before we do that, we could get really, really bogged down here in the story of Noah. There's a considerable amount of stuff to sift through here. You have the science side of it. You have the disagreements of it on like what different things mean. You have just a plethora of things that we could just sift through. But let me remind you and myself that we are studying the faith of Noah, and so we're going to kind of skip through the story a little bit. Even though you guys didn't remember that the whole earth was covered in water, which baffles me, we're not going to review all of that today. Anyways, all right. So Genesis chapter 6, 1 through 8. Can someone read that real quick?
I got it. And it came to pass when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and that they took them as wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he is also of flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth on those days, and
Mm. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, every intention. All right. So that's kind of the premise that we're working off of here. This is the world that Noah lives in. All right. Next reader. Let's look at a little bit later. So I'm just going to kind of cut through some of the story. There's a lot to read here, so we're not going to read it all. Noah is seen by the Lord, and he's instructed to build the ark, right? He's given very intentional, specific instructions, how to build, all that kind of stuff, right? Someone read 6:22.
Thus Noah did according to all that God had commanded him, so he did.
Wow. Boom. All right, lesson's over. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, like, if this is how stuff went in our lives and in everyone's life, man, we'd be living in a different place. You know, just simply put, and I know that there might have been some more here. You know, this is a recounting of the Noah's life here, and somewhat of a brief one considering what is going on, the flooding of the world. But it's so simply put right there. He just did it. So let's move on.
So something was bad enough that caused the Lord to snuff out all of life.
Mm-hmm.
Not only mankind, but the animals as well.
Right.
Other than the ones that were on the ark.
Right.
So something pretty bad caused the de-escalation of morality in a fast way.
Yes. Actually, that was going to be one of the points that I wanted to talk about later that I don't think that we're going to get to. But anyways, I don't think we're going to get to it. So let's go to chapter 7, verse 5 here. Yes, just verse 5.
And Noah did according to all that the Lord commanded him.
You know, it's super easy to just be like, this is 2 verses where Noah is following exactly what the Lord said. But, I mean, this is the instruction to build an ark when the world would be flooded in something that is totally incomprehensible to Noah. And then, continuing this, this is going to be a long process. So a lot of time has passed between the instruction of the ark and the occurrences here that we're talking about in verse 5. But through it all, we see that Noah has this it's like this pre-programmed response almost. He did it all that the Lord had commanded him. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. And that's what led him to this position. He wouldn't have been in this position if he was like all the other people without that faith. All right. Now, in response to that, let's say we have this attitude about our life. What's significant about that is something that we'll find in chapter 8, verse 1. Someone read that?
And Noah remembered
Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark, and God made a wind pass over the earth and the waters subsided.
So did God forget him for a while or something like that? And he's like, oh, Noah, bummer. It's been 150 days or something. No, this is kind of creative language here. It's almost sentimental, it sounds like. God remembered Noah. Noah was the way he was. That put him in the position that he was in. He was close with God, and God remembered him. The significance of that, such a simple verse, the significance of that is really great and will change anybody's life, right? And then, likewise, if we go to verse 20 of chapter 8, what does verse 20 say? Oh, before someone reads that, the flood has subsided. Noah is now off the ark. This is the first thing that Noah does. What does verse 20 say?
Says that when Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird, and offered a burnt offering on the altar.
You kind of, in this brief, like where we're just like picking out these little verses and kind of getting rid of all of the background of the story, are you kind of seeing like the relationship here between God and Noah? And then, what does verse 21 and 22 say?
And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intentions of man's heart is evil from his youth. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. Did you say in 22 also?
Yes.
While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease.
All right. So God responds to, well, Noah, his first action is to make a sacrifice. And God's response to him is love. He sees the good in man again, which he had previously said there was wickedness, enough wickedness to destroy every living thing on the earth. Rich?
I think we got to kind of read between the lines a little bit too, because it says we get the idea that all men were that way, evil only continually, but we know Enoch and Noah weren't that way. They walked with God. So, you know what I'm saying? We got to kind of put things in perspective.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, so, well, let's just go ahead and talk about that thing that I was thinking. If we're studying the Old Testament, or, you know, if anyone is critiquing God in the world that we live in, one of the ready-to-go-to things is, like, God is so, you know, he is not loving. He is so ready to destroy people. He destroyed the whole world in this instance. You know, he used Israel to destroy so many different peoples, and his judgment on it was so, I guess, universal to some people. Like, he would wipe out a whole community. You know, how is that just? How is that loving?
Are you asking? Or?
Yeah.
Well, because when you know something's going to corrupt your family,
Mm-hmm.
cause them to fall away, you do everything you can to prevent, you're going to, you're not going to want that contamination to come into your family.
Sure.
And so it's actually a loving act that he had them destroyed, because they were a product, I say they, the Nephilim and that genetic was a forbidden mixture. It was never supposed to happen in the first place.
Yeah.
So he had to deal with that, and that was his way of dealing with it.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly why we need to go out into all the world and destroy all of the other religions, right? No. Okay. Yeah, Jesse?
Just to add to what Rick was saying too, there are scriptures in the Old Testament speak to God declaring that their sins had reached a point where he could ignore it no more. And God's omniscient, we're not, and he knows if in their hearts if they were going to ever repent and do good, and at least in certain cases, we read that these people were never going to do that. And so we don't fully understand everything as to why God doesn't. I mean, it is an interesting question and one worth, discussing and studying and wrestling with. Because there are many people in the world who look to that and say, how could God, a loving God, do that?
Right.
There's a book called Is God a Moral Monster? It points to this question. But, and too, the other aspect is, bringing in the Messiah and preparing, the way for that seed to come and preserving the line, going all the way back to Genesis 3, which is, all of this is ultimately about that.
Right. Yeah, and so why is the mode different today than it was through all of that time before? Why do we not have the same instruction to go out and destroy different people groups and civilizations who have completely departed from Christianity? Why is it not our responsibility to do the same thing like God's people before? Yeah, Jesse.
Yeah, sorry, no, I just shared a scripture yesterday with
I think that is definitely a point that we cannot ignore. I think that an additional point is also uh, the Christian covenant that Christ established is, yes, it's grace-based, but it's also it's self-sustaining. You know, there are no more prophets. There are no more inspired leaders of man anymore. Whereas back in this day, something that I think it was you, Jesse, said earlier, there was a lot to this, and of course would have been a lot behind the decision making that isn't going to be communicated necessarily in the text. But one thing is clear: some of it is communicated that these people's sin had gone so far that it could not be ignored by God, and that will definitely happen in in the world today. A place could go so far that it can't be ignored by God. How does God deal with that? Does He deal with it through Christians going and conquering those people, or does He do it by His own will, kind of in in behind the scenes, if you will? Sorry, Sarah, I've let you hold your hand up long enough.
Going back to how people view Noah's story, this wrathful God, they often overlook the little part of, in verse 19 it says, all the animals left the ark.
Mm.
And that's the end of it. But think about it, if a wolf just chomped a rabbit, we wouldn't have rabbits.
Mm-hmm.
God kept watching over and curating and allowing animals to procreate and rebuild,
Mm-hmm.
so that we have this beautiful world. So there was love of caring for the world and making sure it came back and taking care of that for us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love there. He didn't just
Oh, for sure. I mean, how did I don't know if you guys go back in time, you know that diseases were a big thing, especially where there were animals in it. This is a big wooden thing that had every animal in it, which means every disease likely could have been in it. If this was something orchestrated by a zoologist or something like this would have been a disaster. Almost all of them would have died. It's just not feasible for someone like us to plan something like that, given the tools especially that they had. And yeah.
This long suffering is very well established.
Mm-hmm.
By the fact that He only does this once. And how often have very few times.
Mm-hmm.
He could do this every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I like this country. I think it's a fun country. But come on.
Yeah.
Look at what goes on here every day.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? He's fully justified any day in getting up and bringing the gospel.
Yeah.
It's very rare that He makes mistakes. And that helps us. These people in the land, they had 400 years
Mm-hmm.
to stop this.
Yeah, and the way that God handled Noah and the way that God handled Lot's family too is, in these places it really doesn't take many people who are righteous to save a whole group for as much time as He can. It's not something that He wants to go to immediately, for sure. Mm-hmm. And that's some of the details.
This area right here where I'm telling you to do this.
Yeah.
And those people could have left.
Mm-hmm.
All the Israelites are covenant. They all know Jehovah Witness. They all know what happened in Egypt. No, we're going to stay right here. We're going to resist. The rebellion is like an ocean.
Yeah.
And He's long suffering. Just think of His promises like we did this week. See, I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I exist because that promise is kept.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say that we exist because the heavens were about to close and started raining. And outside of that, we would all be.
Yep, true. Very true. Tom?
But God's people do fall away. Look at what happened to Israel in the conquest by Babylon.
Oh, yeah.
God's people turned their back on him. The prophets tell them that they no longer followed him. They
Mhm.
abhorred what they were doing.
Mhm.
So he sent other countries in to wipe them out
Mhm.
and take them away to captivity. And it's like he's not above using another means to take away evil.
Yeah.
It's just such a point.
Yeah. Rich, real quick, and then I got to wrap this up here.
Well, like John said, the Lord's long long suffering and patience is well established. Well, we have to kind of understand what was going on behind the scenes here that caused that flood. And you have to realize that there were people that were led astray to the point that they were sacrificing their babies. They were killing and murdering their babies. And the Israelites, God's people, were following suit. And so he had to eradicate that.
Right.
How could a loving God not do that, if you want to look at it from that standpoint?
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with that is while these things are communicated in very, in such brevity, oftentimes there's a lot behind the scenes. And like is kind of the whole moral of Job, is there's a lot that goes into God's decision making. Of course, it's probably not hard for him. I don't even know if hard is something that like you can consider anything for God, you know. But from our standpoint, it's not hard for God. But there's so much there that it is beyond our comprehension. These kinds of things. He also knows the heart of man. Not only the heart of man, but he knows what that man is going to do in the future. He knows what that man's offspring are going to do in the future. Like John was saying, if it was necessary, God would have known. And if it wasn't, God wouldn't have destroyed everything, most likely, and to have this clean slate. We do have a loving God. We see that in the way that God lived with Noah. Now, unfortunately, our time is now up, but I want to take just a second because this is really fascinating to me. This isn't necessarily about the faith of Noah per se, but the place that Noah is in the book of Genesis, with so much of the intention of Genesis being to establish the covenant with man, but also the lineage that would lead up to Christ. It's like an interesting combination of the two. If you go to chapter 10, which we typically stop in Noah's story before chapter 10, right? Unfortunately, we didn't get to talk about Noah's sin today. But if you'll look at chapter 10, you see the lineage of Noah, the descendants of them, the people groups that are created. And if you think about the near future, or the not so near future even, this is people's descendants. This is his descendants creating all these different people groups. These are going to become very strong civilizations. These are going to become the civilizations that Israel is interacting with, right? So, the intended audience of Hebrews, just like the Jews of the Old Testament when Moses was writing this, the Genesis, the book of Genesis and all the other books, chapter 10 is really, really important to what's going on to the intended audience. Now, I can't really tell you about what's going on there because we're out of time, but it's something that's really fascinating to look into if you ever get some time on your own. Joseph?
Oh, I just got one thing. Usually the people that try to make that argument usually don't want to believe in consequences for actions. Because
Yeah.
the next argument is going to be, well, how can a loving God judge people and send them to hell?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we see time and time again, we saw with Adam and Eve, there was consequences to his actions. Moses had consequences to his actions.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many in the Bible that had consequences to actions, and people don't want to believe that.
Yeah, and equally as dangerous, just the lack of understanding the nature of free will. Just because we have free will doesn't mean that God does not know what we're going to do. You know, I don't know how that works, but I also don't know how he created my organs, you know, so. I mean, just because we can't understand something in our own human reasoning does not mean that it's not so, basically. But anyways, really appreciate your time this morning, and I'm going to miss you guys because if you haven't heard, we're moving today. And I really appreciate the love and the, what's the word? Oh, man. Just the abundant generosity that our family has received from all of you guys. And so it's kind of, I wish that I had more time to prepare this lesson than I did, but it was my pleasure to come before you today and have some really good discussion with you guys this morning.